What if your next ammo purchase wasn't just between you and the cashier, but quietly logged, tagged, and potentially reviewed by someone you've never met? That's not a dystopian fantasy. It's exactly what's rolling out in several U.S. states starting next month. New laws in places like California, Colorado, and New York are pressuring credit card companies to use special merchant codes for ammo and firearm retailers. Every time you swipe, that transaction could be logged, stored, and analyzed. What's alarming is that this tracking doesn't target criminals. It targets ordinary citizens doing something perfectly legal. It's part of a growing push to monitor firearms-related activity in ways we've never seen before. So, whether you're a seasoned gun owner, a new buyer trying to understand your rights, or just someone concerned about where all this is headed, what comes next is going to matter. I've pulled together the facts, timelines, and real-world options you won't hear on the nightly news. And by the end of this video, you'll be ahead of 99% of people who still have no idea this is even happening. What is digital ammo tracking? It's not often that a tiny 4-digit code can spark a national privacy debate. But that's exactly what's happening right now. At the center of all this is something called a Merchant Category Code, or MCC. It's a number used by credit card companies to classify businesses by the type of goods or services they sell. Normally, it's harmless. Grocery stores and gas stations. Sporting goods all have their own codes. But in 2023, an entirely new code was approved specifically for firearms and ammunition retailers. That means when you swipe your card at a gun shop, even if you're just buying ear protection or a box of 22, it can now be tagged under this category. On its own, that might not sound like a big deal, but this code opens the door to bulk tracking, pattern recognition, and even potential red flagging by banks or government agencies. It creates a digital trail that didn't exist before, one that groups ammo purchases together in a way that's easy to monitor. And here's the key point. This doesn't show what you bought, just that you bought something at a gun-related business. That ambiguity is where the debate starts. Critics say it's ripe for abuse. Supporters say it's just another fraud prevention tool. But regardless of what side you're on, the fact remains the code is live. And in some states, its use becomes mandatory starting next month. State-by-state timeline. This isn't a slow-burning policy idea anymore. It's on the calendar, and it starts next month. The first wave of states enforcing digital ammo tracking through merchant codes is already set. California, New York, and Colorado are leading the charge. These states passed legislation over the past year requiring payment processors and retailers to implement the new firearms and ammunition MCCs. And by July 2025, that requirement becomes real for consumers. In California, the groundwork was laid early. Assembly Bill 1587 passed in 2024 and set deadlines for card networks to isolate and tag transactions made at gun shops, including those selling ammunition. Starting July 1st, every ammo purchase made with a card in California will be flagged under the new code. Colorado followed close behind with Senate Bill 24066. The law doesn't just require implementation, it also gives the state authority to investigate transactions deemed irregular or high risk. This measure officially activates state-level monitoring of MCC-tracked purchases beginning this July as well. In New York, Governor Hochul has already praised the use of MCCs as a tool to combat illegal stockpiling. The state's financial regulators have finalized rules requiring banks and processors to adopt the code across firearms-related sales. With compliance enforcement also going live in July, these states aren't just adopting the code, they're mandating that banks and processors enforce it. That means it's not up to the retailer anymore. It's hardwired into the payment infrastructure. Once the MCC is attached to the business, every card transaction, whether it's for a scope, a box of shells, or even a range fee, will be bucketed under the same firearm-related category. Meanwhile, More than 20 other states have gone the opposite direction. Places like Texas, Florida, Tennessee, and Montana have passed legislation banning the use of MCCs for firearm or ammunition purchases, arguing that it's a violation of consumer privacy and a slippery slope toward a de facto gun registry. And at the federal level, bills like the Protecting Privacy and Purchases Act, introduced in both chambers of Congress earlier this year, aim to outlaw the use of MCCs for firearms and ammo altogether. But those efforts are stalled in committee, and as of this month, they've had no effect on the July 2025 rollout in pro-MCC states. The bottom line is clear, depending on where you live. Digital tracking of ammo purchases could begin in just a matter of weeks. The patchwork of laws means your rights and privacy could change dramatically at the swipe of a card. Literally. Who is affected? The effects of this rollout will ripple far beyond just a few gun stores in big cities. This change lands directly on the everyday gun owner, and its reach extends deeper than most people expect. If you live in California, New York, or Colorado, and you use a credit or debit card to buy ammunition, you will be affected. Whether you're purchasing a single box of target rounds or stocking up for the season, the transaction will now be categorized under a special firearms-related merchant code, not a generic sporting goods label. That data can be stored, analyzed, or flagged based on internal thresholds set by financial institutions, or even reviewed by state authorities. And it doesn't stop at the individual buyer. Retailers in these states are required to comply by law, and if they don't properly assign the MCC, they risk steep civil penalties. Up to $10,000 per violation in some cases. For smaller shops, that's a business-ending threat. Many are being forced to adapt quickly, sometimes without clear guidance from processors or the state. Meanwhile, banks and credit card companies, some of which had paused MCC enforcement under pressure from lawsuits in 2023, are now required to act in these states. The voluntary phase is over. In affected regions, enforcement is now embedded in law for people who prefer to maintain privacy, particularly those who already avoid electronic payments for firearm-related purchases. This development sharpens the divide. Cash remains anonymous. But as more states add tracking requirements and federal agencies show interest in expanding these tools, the space for truly private transactions is shrinking. And while the stated goal of these laws is to prevent mass violence or criminal stockpiling, the reality is that most flagged transactions will come from law-abiding Americans making entirely legal purchases. That's where the real concern lies. The burden of surveillance is falling not on bad actors, but on the public at large. This is no longer just a theoretical debate. As of next month, for millions of people, the shift from private to traceable will happen the moment they swipe their card. Why it matters. The quiet introduction of digital tracking in ammo sales marks one of the most consequential shifts in the relationship between lawful gun ownership and financial surveillance in modern U.S. history. Not because of what's being tracked, but because of how subtly the line is being crossed. Supporters of these merchant codes argue they are a neutral tool, just another way to help banks identify fraud or detect alarming purchase patterns before something tragic occurs. In interviews and press releases, lawmakers in states like New York and California have framed these measures as part of a broader public safety strategy. Governor Hochul, for instance, stated plainly that MCCs will allow the state to spot irregularities in ammo stockpiling that could otherwise go unnoticed. But critics, privacy advocates, gun rights organizations, and even neutral financial experts have raised urgent concerns. The central issue isn't about what's being bought, but about how little control the buyer has over what is done with that data. The merchant code doesn't say you bought a 9mm, or birdshot, or blanks. It simply says you shopped at a gun-related business. That level of vagueness leaves room for misunderstanding, misinterpretation, and mislabeling by automated systems. Worse still, there's no clear guardrail on how this information might be shared, stored, or acted upon. There's no official requirement that law enforcement obtain a warrant to access trends or bulk data if it's shared voluntarily by a financial institution. That opens a doorway to back-channel surveillance, an unofficial registry built not through legislation, but through private sector compliance. And it doesn't end at the state level. In Washington, 2025 has already seen renewed interest in financial tracking tools tied to firearm-related transactions. Though bills like the Protecting Privacy and Purchases Act have been introduced, they remain stalled, leaving an open field for states to push ahead, and for data collection practices to evolve unchecked. Perhaps most critically, this sets a precedent. If ammunition purchases can be flagged and categorized for risk monitoring, what stops the same logic from being applied to other constitutionally protected activities, from digital censorship to economic exclusion? The trend line here is concerning. This is why the rollout next month matters. It's not just about a code or a transaction. It's about normalizing quiet control mechanisms. It's about turning a private, lawful act into a data point and placing that point on someone else's dashboard without your knowledge. When technology and regulation intersect in silence, the result is rarely neutral. It's calculated, and it's often permanent. That'll happen the moment they swipe their card. What you can do. The window for silent resistance is still open, but it's narrowing. With tracking laws going active next month, the steps you take now will determine whether your ammunition purchases remain private or become another data stream in someone else's ledger. Cash is your first line of defense. In states where MCC tracking becomes mandatory, using credit or debit cards at firearms-related retailers will automatically generate flagged transaction data. But cash, for now, still leaves no digital trail. If you're concerned about anonymity, especially in jurisdictions like California or New York, moving away from card-based purchases is one of the most effective legal options left. Timing matters. 2. This is not a national law. Yet. That means crossing state lines for your purchases could give you more control over how, or whether, your transaction is tracked. Many states, including Texas, Montana, and Tennessee, have passed laws banning the use of these merchant codes. Buying there, in person and with cash, reduces exposure significantly. For those unable to travel or pay in cash, there's still meaningful action to take. Several national organizations are pushing back through litigation and lobbying, joining or supporting these efforts. Whether it's the NSSF, Second Amendment Foundation, or a local group, adds weight to the collective resistance. There's also power in communicating with your representatives. Bills like the Protecting Privacy and Purchases Act haven't failed. They've stalled. Congressional pressure is still building, especially as more constituents make it clear that financial surveillance tied to legal behavior is a red line. Finally, pay attention to your own transaction history. Some banks have already used MCC data to flag or freeze accounts they deem suspicious. Even when no laws were broken, awareness is no longer optional. What's happening next month isn't just about policy. It's about precedent. And the most effective thing you can do is to stay alert, act intentionally, and help others understand what's quietly being built around them. The erosion of privacy doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes, it's a quiet change in code, subtle, bureaucratic, but irreversible if left unchallenged. The lines between lawful ownership and surveillance are being redrawn, and awareness is your first defense. Stay informed, make deliberate choices, and speak up before policies become permanent norms. If this video helped clarify what's coming, give it a like so others can find it too. Subscribe for future updates as laws evolve. And, most importantly, share this with someone who buys ammo, because silence is exactly what this system depends on.